July 17th, 2020. Amidst the woes of the pandemic, McLaren was facing a hard financial deadline that, if missed, could have ended 6 decades of racing history. How does a company go from staring into the abyss to a valuation of over $5 billion within all of 5 years? Spring 2020. The world closed. On the 26th of May, 2020, McLaren Group publicly announced it would cut around 1,200 jobs, roughly a quarter of its workforce, as part of a major restructure driven by the pandemic's collapse in race events, car sales, and consulting work. The cuts followed earlier emergency measures. After McLaren furloughed staff in March-April 2020, senior management and drivers agreed pay reductions as the business sought immediate cost relief. Behind the headlines, the situation was urgent and legal. In late June 2020, McLaren went to the UK High Court in a dispute with existing bondholders, arguing it needed to raise emergency financing using its Woking headquarters and historic car collection as collateral. Court filings revealed the severity. The group faced an immediate liquidity shortfall and warned that without new funds by July 17, 2020, it would be unable to meet its obligations, a timeline that effectively put the company days away from running out of cash. This underscored just how fragile the business had become. Despite owning one of the world's most advanced F1 teams and a luxury car brand, McLaren was suddenly on a knife edge, forced to fight for survival in open court. A company that once counted itself in championships was now counting hours. A desperate but decisive move followed. June 29, 2020, McLaren secured a £150 million loan from the National Bank of Bahrain, a lifeline that bought breathing room while leadership hunted longer-term solutions. Then they sold the bricks. In April 2021, McLaren completed a sale and leaseback of the McLaren Technology Center for about £170 million to Global Net Lease, monetizing the HQ to extend runway. This collapse wasn't born in 2020. The cracks grew in earlier years, rising debt in 2018, a softer supercar market in 2019, and margins under pressure even before COVID. The pandemic accelerated a slow-motion decline. Selling the HQ bought time, but time without a new approach is a countdown. F1 is a closed economy. Liberty Media, which owns the commercial rights, distributes prize money through a tightly controlled revenue-sharing agreement. This money is carved up between the 10 teams, with historic bonuses and performance payments shaping who thrives and who struggles. Sponsors don't just buy logos on cars. They purchase global visibility and digital reach that stretches far beyond the paddock. Hospitality is another pillar. F1's Paddock Club, often charging $5,000 per weekend ticket, sells proximity to the sport's inner circle of drivers, CEOs, and royalty. Think of F1 like a luxury watchmaker, limited supply, complicated craftsmanship, and an ecosystem that sells not only the product but the status of owning it, which leads to scarcity. Only 20 drivers, 10 teams, and around 23 races per season exist by design. Unlike football or basketball, there's no expansion franchise to buy into. The grid is capped, and entry requires not just billions in funding, but also FIA approval. That artificial scarcity keeps valuations sky high. With recent team sales, like Audi's deal to take over Sauber, valued in the hundreds of millions of dollars. In other words, F1 isn't just sport. It's a gated economic system where every dollar circulates inside the same exclusive ecosystem. But a closed economy favors incumbents, until the rules change. March 2020. As the pandemic froze races and revenues, Formula One teams agreed on emergency cost-saving measures, one of which being to reduce the incoming budget cap. Originally planned at $175 million per team, this was slashed down to around $145 million for the 2021 season. This wasn't just a bookkeeping tweak, it was a structural reset. For decades, top teams like Mercedes, Ferrari, and Red Bull had been spending well north of $300 to $400 million annually, outgunning midfield outfits that could barely reach half that. By locking in a hard ceiling, FIA and Liberty Media effectively narrowed the resource gap, giving leaner challengers like McLaren a fighting chance to compete on more level financial terms. This was like imposing a golf handicap on the game's longest hitters. Suddenly, raw budgetary power mattered less than clever strategy and efficient operations. The cap also came with progressive reductions, $145 million in 2021, dropping to $140 million in 2022, and then $135 million from 2023 through 2025, adjusting only for inflation and additional allowances for things like sprint races. And here's the crucial part. The cost cap didn't just save money, it reshaped incentives. Teams could no longer brute force performance by outspending rivals. They had to innovate more efficiently, prioritize investments, and balance technical ambition against strict budget lines. For McLaren, still climbing out of financial crisis, this wasn't a handicap, it was a lifeline. That cost cap didn't save anyone by itself, but it changed the competitive landscape. When the arms race slows, nimble operators can convert smaller budgets into outsized performance. But who would bet on an underdog when the rules changed? In late 2020, MSP Sports Capital, led by Jeff Murad, committed equity to McLaren Racing. They weren't buying only race results, they were buying future commercial upside, storytelling, hospitality, partnerships, and the benefit of a shrunken budget race. That money was a bridge to a bigger plan. Combined with the cost cap, it let McLaren reallocate resources into revenue-generating products instead of outrunning better-funded teams. But capital and rules only enable a strategy. You need a new product to sell. As McLaren's CEO, Zak Brown said, "If you don't play the game, you get shoved off the track." So this is exactly what they did. McLaren attacked the assumption that race results were the only bill-paying asset. For decades, Formula One teams had relied on a simple formula: sponsorships tied to car performance, prize money from the FIA, and maybe some merchandise. But McLaren reframed their North Star, treating the team less like a seasonal competitor and more like a year-round entertainment engine. That meant building multiple commercial pillars: hospitality and premium experiences, licensing partnerships, memberships, fan clubs, merchandise sales, and driving experiences at the McLaren Technology Center. Imagine a restaurant that stops relying on walk-ins and launches a members-only chef's table. The food may be the same, but you now sell status, scarcity, and backstage access, and margins look very different. The logic was simple. Stop treating a Grand Prix as 90 minutes of revenue potential and start treating the McLaren badge as a 365-day membership into a global club. This pivot effectively transformed McLaren Racing from a cost center dependent on prize money into a diversified entertainment platform that monetized access, scarcity, and lifestyle. McLaren also leveraged a recent boost to Formula One interest from Netflix's Drive to Survive. The series, launched in 2019, reached audiences who had never watched a Grand Prix, and by 2022 was credited with helping F1 achieve its largest ever US TV audience.
The Netflix effect has been awesome. Brought in so many women, youth, North America. Now you got the Brad Pitt movie, going to be awesome. You know, the CNBCs of the world. I don't think you were covering Formula One like you are today 5-6 years ago. So I think what's ended up happening is it become a very hot sport, a thing of the moment. But I don't think that moment's going to come to an end anytime soon. And then you've got everyone clamoring to the sport to cover different aspects of it, and it just continues to kind of fuel itself.
McLaren leaned hard into those storylines. Instead of keeping the garage closed, they encouraged cameras to showcase the personalities of drivers like Lando Norris and Daniel Ricciardo, turning them into cultural figures beyond the track. Norris, for example, became one of F1's most followed drivers on Twitch and Instagram, cultivating millions of younger fans. Ricciardo's charisma and Netflix exposure even led to Hollywood deals, including a role as executive producer on an F1-inspired show for Hulu. For McLaren, the lesson was clear. In the Netflix era, the garage is as valuable as the car. Storylines and personalities drive fandom, and fandom drives revenue, from merchandise and hospitality to long-term sponsor loyalty. By embracing narrative, McLaren converted visibility into a business asset. Added capability plus audience equals magnet for sponsors. But McLaren didn't stop there, they diversified. McLaren refused to be a single series business. They built a portfolio: IndyCar, Formula E, and esports, each channel offering different commercial advantages. By August 2021, McLaren had announced a majority stake, roughly 75%, in Aero McLaren SP, securing a full-time IndyCar presence and direct access to the US market. They launched Neon McLaren Formula E for the 2022 to 2023 season, locking into EV and sustainability conversations, and they expanded esports and digital initiatives to capture younger fans. Think of this like a farmer planting multiple crops. If the wheat suffers, apples and vegetables still produce income. McLaren's portfolio spreads risk and creates cross-pollination. Those cross-feed mechanics turn into commercial momentum, and then performance makes the premium stick. All the commercial engineering only compounds when the car is credible. Small on-track wins unlock trust and commercial acceleration. Podium finishes help to restore the brand's cachet. Sponsors felt safer. Hospitality sold as memberships in something winning, and merchandise shifted toward premium lifestyle goods. The multiplier was simple. Better results, higher perceived value, higher prices, and stronger partners. More investment into the car equals better results.
So I think that was a big victory for the team, and then of course our sponsor partners.
With the flywheel engaged, one last piece of the puzzle remained: long horizon capital that could scale the model. In September 2025, Bahrain's Mumtalakat and Abu Dhabi's CYVN Holdings completed a strategic buyout of McLaren Racing, with the reporting placing the transaction value around $5 billion. This move has supplied patient capital that thinks in decades, not quarters, funding R&D, infrastructure, and marketing in ways short-term capital cannot. For earlier backers like MSP, the deal represents a multi-fold value realization relative to the 2020 implied valuation. Precise payouts are private, but the strategic outcome is public. McLaren now sits in sovereign-level ownership. Knowledge is leverage. The companies that survive disruption don't just adapt, they create new markets and sell identity, access, and membership.